We're joined now by Jaco Booyens, an anti-sex trafficking advocate and filmmaker. Jaco, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
We learned from our last guest how widespread pornography consumption is and how it's not really talked about as a social problem. Another thing that's not really talked about is the creation of pornography itself. A lot of people think it's made by, consenting actors who are paid for their work, so no harm done. Is that true?
Absolutely not. How it actually works, in fact, is we know that 80% of what we call mainstream porn are actually women who are placed there by their traffickers because they're not reaching their money quota. And so this is abuse. And the notion that porn doesn't hurt people, it hurts everybody. It hurts the user the most, and they just don't know it. But it's force, fraud, and coercion. It's violent. They don't know about the ER visits. And the drugs and the forced abortions that these porn actresses go through. And so if you look at the brothel society in Las Vegas, over 90% of what would be called prostitutes in legal brothels have claimed rape cases through porn, where they are forced to perform acts that they don't want to perform.
What about when it comes to children? One of the things we were talking about earlier is how young kids are exposed to pornography. Now the average age is 8 years old. Even in 2016, it was 11. What about on the other side? Just to throw a stat out there, in an analysis of 130,000 porn titles, teen was the most common word used.
Yeah, absolutely. Teen is the most common word used. Why is that? Because evil has no end. It doesn't. And sexual immorality does not have a bottom. And so people on that track, it's like a drug. You don't start with heroin, you start with an opioid and you work your way towards heroin. Well, it's always leading towards prepubescent children, porn with children, sex with children. And our culture has normalized the notion of what is rape? What is abuse? We just did a study where we showed, and talked about rape to teenage boys, and they said, what's wrong with that? Because they see it every single day. Because remember now, when I was in high school in the mid-90s, if you wanted porn, you had to go sneak into a gas station with a fake ID, buy a book that's behind a black cover, and the worst it was going to be is probably Pamela Anderson without her top on a motorcycle. It's porn. Today, the first porn that a child sees is gang rape. It's violent. And so their idea of love, intimacy is shattered in a minute. And you do understand that porn is the only drug on earth that physically changes the neuropathways of the brain. It alters your human state. It's not like it's alcohol that's external or a drug that if you don't touch it, it's away from you. Sex is internal. So the desire and the drug both are internal. The damage is internal. So it's devastating our youth. And because we've normalized it, now we're coercing on social platforms children to produce porn on themselves, to self-implicate so that they can be exploited.
Let's talk a bit more about social media, because that's part of the problem, the ubiquity of pornography. It's on every social media platform. What are they doing about it?
They are not. They're hiding behind Section 230. We do not have legislators in Washington, D.C. that has enough chutzpah to actually take Section 230 for once and classify, for instance, Facebook as a publisher. Classify Facebook the same way your network is classified, where you're accountable. You have to do research because Facebook is now sharing opinion. They're allowing published material of child porn to live out there on their platform, on Twitter and Instagram. The newest is Pinterest. All the moms that get their food recipes from Pinterest recently opened up a chat feature. When you open a chat feature, the predator will go into that chat feature. They will approach children. So these organizations are not holding those publishing these materials accountable. And do you know how difficult it is to get the material removed from Twitter? I'm part of a lawsuit, a class action suit against Twitter. 62 million pornographic images scraped of children scraped off of Facebook last year alone. And so the child that's being exploited now has to go through a legal process to get that image removed, but the child's not seen as the publisher. Some predator published it, so the child has no rights. So their naked images live on the social media sphere forever. social media is ranked, and not just social media, Xbox, PlayStation, any platform where a predator can talk directly to a child. Now remember, you used to have to know the dealer or know the pimp in that red light district, and you have to work through his channels, and it was territorial. Those days are over. The buyer of sex now doesn't need a pimp or a trafficker. The buyer of sex now talks to the teenager directly on social media while he or she's sitting at the dinner table, and they're coercing them, and they're breaking down their boundaries, and they're indoctrinating them over time. And then they get the child to self-implicate and self-sacrifice by naked images, by sharing content. They basically earn the heart and the trust of the child, and then the actual physical abuse engagement will happen in an engagement. So it's so nefarious, it's so dangerous that it's in people's homes while the child is at home. You don't need to kidnap a child today to traffic a child.
And it all starts because the child is exposed to pornography, so even the initial suggestions don't seem outlandish.
Look, and this is a bold statement, but porn is the feeder drug to sex trafficking. It is the tool to normalize the visualization of sex, sharing sexual content, sexual conversation. This is why I'm standing against comprehensive sex ed in the classroom, because the teacher is now normalizing sex talk at any level with the child. The child does not have the cognitive ability, contrary to the Biden administration's belief. The child does not have the cognitive ability to differentiate which adult is safe and which one is not. When you grew up, there was a term called stranger danger. Which stranger? All of them. Why all of them? Because you can't differentiate which one's good and which one's bad. So now we're normalizing sex talk with 5-year-olds in the classroom. Well, my teacher talks to me about sex. This guy online seems kind. He wants to talk about sex, so the child engages in the conversation.
Jaco, we've got to wrap up, but is there something you would suggest to parents?
Yeah, this is the hour for you to be a parent and not your child's friend. You need to know what they're watching, who they're talking to. You need to know their friends' parents. Do no sleepovers. If someone sleeps over at your house, you need to engage with your sons. You need to ask the bold question whether they are exposed to porn. Wives to the husbands, husbands to the wives. If porn is in your community is a vulnerable community to traffickers. And then please go to our website, Jaco Booyens Ministries, or helpjbm.org, and we can share resources with you, how you can train, what to see, how to talk to your children, how to fortify your family and protect your community.
Jaco Booyens, thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you.